I'm going to call this meeting the Zoning and Planning Committee together. I am Council President Johnson, and I'm standing in for Councilmember Bender today. And I'm joined by Councilmember Warsami, members of the committee, Councilmember Goodman, and Councilmember Reich. We're a quorum of the Zoning and Planning Committee. So we have a number of items on our agenda today. The first item that I'm going to move approval of is our consent agenda. And so I'm going to move the consent agenda, which includes item 2, partial alley vacation on Harriet Avenue South, a rezoning on Harriet Avenue South, number 2 and 3, a number 4, local historic landmark designation, 2200 Park Avenue, and number 5, a referral to staff for an ordinance amending the code relating to the zoning code, revising minimum lot area requirements for two-family dwellings in the R2 and R2B zoning district. So I will move that consent agenda. Is there anyone that wants to pull any of those items off before we vote? Seeing none, clerk can call the roll.
Councilmember Warsami.
Aye.
Goodman. Aye. Reich. Aye. B. Johnson.
Aye. I'm sorry. Ma'am, those items do not require a public hearing, so we're not going to have the public speak, but you certainly can give your statement to the city clerk and it'll be a part of the public record. Thank you. That's fine. Thank you. Next item then is a public hearing on a site plan review for 2008 Bryant Avenue South. And we have a number of people signed up to speak. And so I will read names, excuse me, we'll have a staff presentation and then we'll go through our list of people that wish to speak about item 1.
Good morning, Council President Johnson, committee members. This project is an appeal for
your name. I'm sorry.
Excuse me.
Your name.
Oh, yes. My name is Mayling Smith, and I'm a representative of Community Planning and Economic Development.
All right, thank you so much.
The project before you is 2008 Bryant Avenue South. There's an appeal for this project that was approved at the City Planning Commission in March. The site is located near the intersection of Franklin and Hennepin. It's more closely at the intersection of Franklin and Bryant, and there are a number of single-story homes, but also low-rise apartment buildings on this block. The image at the top shows the property centered, and that would be, that's a 2.5-story building with 3 dwelling units currently, and that would be demolished for the proposal. And the images on the bottom show you what's directly across the street. The zoning for this parcel is R6. This is our highest density residential district in the zoning code. And the entire block that the proposed development is on contains R6 zoning. And the site to the north is OR2, so that's the only exception to the R6 zoning. So this zoning district has been established to provide an environment of high density apartments, congregate living arrangements, and cluster developments with lots of 5,000 square feet or more. It also allows institutions as well. The max height in this district is 6 stories or 84 feet. So the proposed development would contain a total of 10 dwelling units. Each level of the building would contain 2 dwelling units, and that includes the basement. So these are just some floor plans in case we need to reference them. There's also a rooftop deck that is proposed. The primary exterior materials would be stucco, cementitious lap siding, and stained cedar. The only application that is triggered for this project is site plan review. This is required for applications with 5 or more dwelling units, and a public hearing for this type of development is triggered when there are at least 10 dwelling units. And so the site plan review application was approved on the consent agenda by the City Planning Commission on March 28th. There were 4 interrelated items that required alternative compliance, as you will find in the staff report. When there is alternative compliance for one of the site plan review standards, there are 3 ways that this can be, that staff and the City Planning Commission can grant alternative compliance. And so the first is by including amenities or improvements that address the adverse effects of not complying with site plan review. The second way would be finding that strict adherence to the standards in site plan review would be impractical because of the site location or existing conditions. And then the third is that the proposed alternative is consistent with development plans and policies adopted by the City Council. So to summarize what required alternative compliance for this project, there is a 6-foot screen provided between the parking area that contains 2 surface parking stalls and the residential property to the north. This is not fully met along the south parking lot frontage. So the only area that is not providing the full 6-foot screen is this driveway area. A 10-foot driveway is required in the zoning code. So if they go below that, then they are required to have a variance. In addition, moving anything in this direction would trigger a variance for the maneuvering area, which is currently 22 feet. So the City Planning Commission did grant alternative compliance for not providing screening for the 8.5 feet that is the driveway. The rest of that frontage is screened by the proposed trash enclosure. There also was alternative compliance required for not having a landscaped yard with the required trees and shrubs along the south parking lot frontage for the exact same reason. And then there were not enough shrubs within the north parking lot frontage, and the City Planning Commission did not grant alternative compliance for that, and so the applicant will have to comply with the 2 shrub minimum. Here's an overview of their site plan. So as you can see, there is access from Bryant Avenue south. There's no alley. There's a shared driveway with the property to the south, and there's an easement in place for that access. And this just summarizes kind of the site constraints that limit the ability of the applicant to provide the full screening and landscape buffer for the south parking lot frontage. A buffer is not required for the entire building length. It's only required for the 28.5 feet that is between the parking area and the areas to the north and south. And here is a rendering of the proposed project. So that's just a summary of what the application was. If you have any questions, I'm here to help answer any questions, and the applicant is also here to speak.
Anyone have any questions for Ms. Smith? Seeing none, would the applicant care to speak?
Hi, my name is Michael Stoddard. I'm with DJR Architecture.
I'm sorry, I missed your last name, sir.
Michael Stoddard.
Stoddard. Okay, thank you. All right.
And I'm Danny Perkins, one of the owners.
Okay. All right.
I think to continue on with Mei-Ling's presentation, we can talk about the garbage and recycling storage. That was one of the bullet points on the appeal. The required amount of recycling area is 22 square feet, and we've provided 28 square feet, and that same amount for garbage storage as well.
Okay.
Additionally, regarding the landscape buffer to the south, the southern property where the garbage and recycling storage area is, that section to the south is a four-car garage. So there's sort of a natural buffer there in place as it is. Okay, sorry. I'll speak closer into the mic, sorry. Danny, do you have anything to add?
If you guys have any specific questions about the project, I'm here to answer them. But Mei-Ling and Michael have done a great job of summarizing what the project is and how it fits within the zoning law.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Anyone have any questions for the owner or the architect? Seeing none? Is there a representative for the appellant then? Care to speak? Representative for what? The appellant. Healing. For the appeal. I'm sorry. Representative for the appeal. Yes. All right. Okay. No. Okay. Councilmember Goodman is helping me with this. So. Okay. All right. I'm going to open the public hearing, and we'll have a representative from the appellant. Sir, identify yourself, and we will listen, and then we've got a list of people that care to speak. And so once we get through the presentation, then I'll call people up individually to speak.
Thank you. My name is Jim Boyle, and I live at 2624 Bryant Avenue South, and with additional concerned neighbors have formed as Minneapolis Neighbors United to appeal all final actions taken by the Minneapolis City Planning Commission on the 28th of March, approving the land use application by DDMZ Real Estate, the site plan review by City Planner Mei-Ling Smith, and the process by which the Minneapolis City Planning Commission reached its decision for the 2008 Bryant Avenue apartments. So what is Minneapolis Neighbors United? We're a group of concerned citizens who believe in smart growth, not market-driven or unaffordable development for Minneapolis and our neighborhoods. Right now, Minneapolis has a market-driven development plan to increase the tax base rather than intelligent, creative, and sustainable development. We want Minneapolis to be like many communities of all sizes across the country that are using creative strategies to develop in ways that preserve neighborhoods and critical environmental areas, protect water and air quality, and reuse already developed land and structures. It conserves resources by reinvesting in existing infrastructure and rehabilitating or preserving historic buildings. It designs integrated and diverse neighborhoods that have homes near shops, office, schools, houses of worship, parks, and other amenities, giving residents and visitors the option of walking, bicycling, taking public transportation, or driving. It provides a range of different housing types to make it possible for families and individuals of all stages and income categories to find safe, attractive housing they can afford, for senior citizens to age in place, and for young people to afford their first home. And it enhances neighborhoods by involving residents in development decisions, creating vibrant places to live, work, and play. From 1963 to 1975, 100+ houses in the wedge were torn down or bulldozed for apartment buildings. From 1975 to 2015, 0 houses were. And since 2015, 8 houses have been bulldozed. 2008 Bryant would be the 9th. 6 of these 8 are owned by realtors Drew Levin and Danny Perkins. They also own 2008 Bryant and operate under an array of no less than 5 LLCs. They own 26 properties in Lowry Hill East, dozens more in the city of Minneapolis, and seem to receive carte blanche for development from the city, ignoring planning and zoning restrictions that would not be tolerated in more affluent neighborhoods in the city with a high density of owner-occupied properties. This was the case in the development of the 4-story apartment building at 2743 DuPont, which illegally blocks the solar panels of the house across the street. When the owners of this house complained to city officials, they were ignored. The properties they buy seem to never have a for sale sign or an MLS listing, which for realtors is illegal. Often neighbors don't know that these properties are slated to be bulldozed until the utility companies come to cut the service. Minneapolis Neighbors United is currently in conversation with the Minnesota Department of Commerce and the community banks that finance these developments to make sure banks know of the impending commercial real estate bubble they are financing, as these high rent units sit empty, as in the case of the Motive Apartments at 25th and Colfax, which is 90% vacant. You will notice that we have chosen a bulldozer as a symbol we use on our Facebook page and flyers. We believe that our neighborhoods are being bulldozed both literally and metaphorically. In the 10th ward, we've had 8 properties bulldozed since 2015, and more are scheduled. We are also being bulldozed by the actions of the Minneapolis City Planning Commission, and that's why we are appealing the Planning Commission's decision for 2008 Bryant. The Minneapolis City Planning Commission erred in adopting the staff findings for the application by Michael Stoddard on behalf of DDMZ Real Estate and the site plan review for the 2008 Bryant Avenue apartments. By approving the site plan review for the 2008 Bryant Avenue apartments, the CPC's decision will be injurious to the use and enjoyment of adjacent properties and overall neighborhood livability. In addition, this approval will cause other decisions by the CPC to appear suspect due to the decision-making process used for this application. This appeal is based on the following facts. The plan is inadequate and impractical for garbage and recycling storage and removal and snow removal. The neighbors to the south at 2012 Bryant Avenue will suffer injury to the use and enjoyment of their property as there is no landscape buffer at the south lot line and plans include a rooftop deck. Incorrect information exists in the site plan review regarding the Uptown Small Area Plan, Historic Preservation, and the Minneapolis City and Metropolitan Council comprehensive plans. The site plan review is incomplete as the methods of alternative compliance are not provided and relevant public comment was not included. The process leading to the decision by the CPC was incomplete. First, garbage and recycling storage and removal and snow removal. Garbage and recycling storage and removal, current practice is one garbage bin and one recycling bin per unit. The site plan indicates the use of 4 plastic bins for garbage and 4 bins for recycling for a 10-unit commercial building. Every triplex on the same street has 3 bins for garbage and 3 bins for recycling. That's the standard of 1 each per unit. 10 units should require a total of 20 bins. There is no place for 20 bins or even 10 bins. The site plan shows an 8-foot by 4.5-foot single waste collection point right up next to the sidewalk. This does not address the waste management needs of a 10-unit building. The necessity for someone to drag trash bins to the curb and then drag them back is not a practice allowed for any other modern multi-unit building in the neighborhood. In addition, the city of Minneapolis does not usually offer garbage and recycling collection contracts for commercial buildings of more than 4 residential units. This is a 10-unit commercial building. Therefore, the owners would need to have a contract with an outside company that will normally require dumpsters, not individual bins. This would require 2 dumpsters. Although necessary, there is not enough space for 2 dumpsters. And if the owners must have dumpsters, that would necessitate a wider driveway to allow trash and recycling collection. This is a shared driveway. The wear and tear of garbage trucks on residential driveways is well known in Minneapolis and is one of the reasons the practice was discontinued several years ago. The owners of the single-family home at 2012 Bryant should not be held responsible for the wear of increased traffic on their driveway by garbage, recycling, delivery, service, and moving truck servicing 2008 Bryant. The site plan states service vehicles are not expected to access the site. This is absurd and totally unrealistic for a 10-unit building in a neighborhood with crowded streets, high rental turnover, an abundance of moving and delivery trucks, and nowhere to put them, blocking the streets, alleyways, and emergency responders. The location of garbage and recycling bins or dumpsters is also problematic, not to mention an eyesore, as it is placed on the south property line shared with 2012 Bryant Avenue South. Snow removal. The site plan shows a flat roof and rooftop deck from which snow will need to be removed for load purposes. There is also a 2-vehicle parking lot in the back and a shared driveway. The snow removal plan of piling the snow into one of the 2 parking spaces is not feasible. It must be fully removed from the property. It also must not impede the use of the driveway or become the responsibility of the owners of 2012 Bryant Avenue South. Second, landscape buffer and rooftop deck. There is no landscape buffer at the south lot line. The residents of 2012 will have no screening from the commercial property to the north. A rooftop deck is unnecessary to the plans and would interfere with the enjoyment of the property for the residents of 2012 Bryant Avenue South. Noise will be an issue along with other practices that come from non-family oriented rental units. Third, Uptown Small Area Plan and Historic Preservation. The Uptown Small Area Plan was used incorrectly as a reference in this site plan. The Uptown Small Area Plan does not provide specific land use guidelines for this parcel because it is not within the purview of the Uptown Small Area Plan. You can see this in document A. Although next to the Hennepin Commercial Corridor building and next to the Franklin Community Corridor building, it is not within either category. It is a residential multi-unit property in the neighborhood and not within the Uptown Small Area Plan. Historic preservation. The site plan states not applicable. This site is neither historically designated nor is it located in a historic district. This statement distorts the fact that little research was done on the property. Although demolition is not part of the City Planning Commission's review, this statement does affect the decision to demolish a historic structure and allow a new structure to be built on the land. Blanket categorization of all properties not already historically designated or not already located in a historic district as not falling under historic preservation deters research into our history and disallows the formation of new historic designations and historic districts. It allows indiscriminate destruction of our city's cultural and architectural history. Local residents are able to look up the history of the buildings in this neighborhood, but CPED does not seem to have that inclination. You can see that history in document B of the appeal. Comprehensive plans. The city comprehensive plan and the Metropolitan Council plan place a priority on affordable housing and mixing of income levels in neighborhoods. The continued removal of affordable housing in the Lowry Hill East neighborhood and the systematic replacement of that affordable housing with a few market rate, but mainly above market rate or luxury housing goes completely against both plans. Eradication of affordable housing is the opposite of our city's stated goals and plans, even if in practice it is being done indiscriminately. 4, incomplete site plan review. Although alternative compliance is referenced for landscaping and screening of the property, no methods of alternative compliance are provided. The neighbors to the south, west, and north do not know how these issues will be addressed. Public comment. 3 letters were received prior to the hearing on March 28, 2016. 2 of these, the most important 2, were not provided to the Planning Commission. The comments with the most relevance to the development from Matthew Paymar and Dr. Meredith Gill, the owners of 2012 Bryant Avenue, on the south property line and sharing the driveway, were not included in the staff documents. Also, the letter from Alicia Gibson, JD and PhD, the new owner of the property directly across the street, was not included, although in an email from planning staff, she was assured that it would be. You can see these letters in document C13 of the appeal. 5, incomplete process. The process leading up to the CPC decision to approve the process was incomplete. The Minneapolis City Planning Commission based its decision on a site plan that was inadequate, impractical, incorrect, and incomplete. The developers have not appeared at the Lowry Hill East Neighborhood Association Zoning and Planning Committee, which is one of the smart growth strategies I mentioned earlier for resident input, and thus no official comment has come from the association. The neighbors on the south property line at 2012 spoke with the city planner, Mei-Ling Smith, but their correspondence was not given to the CPC commissioners after the decision when they asked if there were any other options for opposing this development that will decrease the quality of their life in their home and their property value. Ms. Smith told them they could file an appeal, but that she wouldn't recommend it because it is unlikely they would win and it would be expensive. Another letter from the new owner of the property across the street was also not provided to the commissioners. The CPC never reviewed or discussed the land use application and the site plan review for 2008 Bryant Apartments at the City Planning Commission, Committee of the Whole, or at the CPC meeting on March 28th. The published agenda for the CPC March 28th meeting showed the 2008 Bryant development as the 3rd item on the agenda. Residents that plan to speak against the proposal timed their entrance to the meeting accordingly. However, in reviewing the video of that meeting, the following occurred. At 2.16 minutes into the meeting, item 3, 2008 Bryant, was moved to the consent agenda. At 2.17 minutes, the chair asked if anyone present wished to speak, including staff, regarding item 3, and as no one was present or chose to speak, 3 minutes into the meeting, at item 3 was approved via the consent agenda. Soon after, when those who planned to speak arrived, a notice had been posted on the door that item 3 had already been approved. The privilege of a public hearing had been denied, and those who wished to speak against this project lost their opportunity. Conclusion, a site plan review is required for the development of a new multiple family residential structure. The site plan should be thorough, complete, and correct. The 2008 Bryant Avenue apartment site plan review is none of these things, and thus provided flawed data by which a decision should not have been made. Thereby, the process by which the Minneapolis City Planning Commission reached its decision was based on flawed data that was not thorough, was not complete, and was not correct. This project sets a dangerous precedent for the residents in our neighborhoods. This project does not fit the historic character of the neighborhood and does not take its neighbors into consideration. We request that this appeal be upheld and, in addition, that a thorough historical review of 2008 Bryant Avenue South be conducted by the Heritage Preservation Committee, not an in-house and incomplete review by a CPED planner. We would also request that any house slated for demolition of over 100 years have the same review. We believe there's an implicit contract between Minneapolis residents and the city officials and staff who are paid by our taxes that we will have a voice in the development of our neighborhoods. Yet there's a growing discontent among residents that their voices aren't heard and that city staff and elected officials don't want to hear what they have to say. By filing this appeal, many residents contributed hard-earned dollars in addition to their tax dollars that support the city to make their voices heard. It shouldn't be this way. We believe we have demonstrated in this appeal that the Minneapolis City Planning Commission based its decision on a site plan that was inadequate, impractical, incorrect, and incomplete, based on flawed information. We urge you to approve the appeal. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Boyle. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Boyle?
Thank you.
Seeing none, I'm going to call on the people that have signed in to speak at the public hearing. And I'm going to call 2 names so that people can be ready to speak after the first person speaks. And I'm going to ask you to keep your comments to 2 minutes. We've got a timer, so we will try and get through this list. First, I have Janet Dray, and then Sarah Lynn Romanishan, and I'm probably messing with your name. So Janet Dray, and then Sarah Lynn, please come up. Ms. Dray, would you please give your name and address then too?
You want an address, you said?
Yes, please.
It's Janet Dray, 2741 Colfax. I am here in support of the appeal on 2008 Bryant. I have been a resident of Lowry Hill for 22 years. I am most disturbed by what will be the loss of yet another home in our neighborhood and by the lack of input allowed from residents. I'll reference the overhead I have up. This is, it's hard to read, but you can see the ownership by the LLC, and these are all homes in our neighborhood, and the list shows now 7 that have been demoed so far. So I'm most disturbed by what will be the loss of another home in our neighborhood and by the lack of input allowed from residents. Those most directly affected by the demo and new development will be next door neighbors, but we are all affected when precious resources are destroyed. It's wasteful. Due to time limitations, I'll focus on 2 issues. First, garbage, recycling, and composting for the site, and then the rooftop terrace. As I understand, the property currently has 3 rental units. The proposed has 10. Minneapolis ordinance requires a minimum of 20 containers, 10 for garbage, 10 for recycling. If only half the units opt for composting, that's an additional 5 containers. There's no alley access, so garbage pickup will be from Bryant. What happens on garbage day when 25 containers are at the curb, or on the sidewalk, or in the street? And what happens in winter? The Elan development used DuPont Avenue to stage garbage and recycling removal for almost a year. Only when neighbors brought this practice to the attention of the city, month after month, did it stop. Why not avoid this by proper planning during the site development process? Is that not part of Minneapolis Planning Commission responsibility? Second issue is the rooftop terrace. This feature seems to show a lack of consideration for the single-family home directly to the south and to surrounding neighbors. Rooftop terrace that allows groups of more than 5 or 6 people has potential to compound noise levels. Noise levels are already very high at the Hennepin-Franklin hub, especially with Liquor Lyles as a neighbor. Smaller
Ms. Drake,
balconies,
can you wrap up,
I have
please?
just another,
All right.
small balconies for each unit would be more appropriate. Unless the terrace at the north edge limits occupancy to 8 to 10, has appropriate sound buffers for noise abatement, should not have been allowed. Once again, appropriate planning. Thank you.
Sarah Lynn and then Audrey Johnson. Would you give your address, please?
My name is Sarah Lynn Romanishin. I'm a resident of Lowry Hill East at 2111 Aldridge and live one short block from the proposed Bryant Avenue apartments. I support the appeal filed by Minneapolis Neighbors United. The site plan application for this project should not be approved. There are many reasons to deny the site plan application, but today I would like to discuss process, particularly agendas and consent agendas. It is appalling the way CPED, the City Planning Commission, the Zoning and Planning Committee, and the City Council are pushing through teardowns and developments with no apparent concern for the welfare of the neighborhoods. The way agendas are manipulated at city meetings are truly unhealthy manifestation of this callousness. Agenda roulette, a reckless and thoughtless game played on constituents at city meetings. The misuse of consent agendas and the seemingly random and pointless rotation of agenda items cause much needless confusion and distress. In the past year, I have had to demand a public hearing and the removal of a consent agenda item. At the Planning Commission on March 28th, the Bryant Avenue apartments were placed, not posted, on the consent agenda and passed within the first 4 minutes of the meeting. My neighbor arrived to speak and was met with a note placed on the door stating that item 3 had already passed. They walked away denied. Even today on the posted agenda, the consent agenda listed several items for 29th and Harriet and Grant, BZZ 7587, which, by the way, is a site plan application that I will go on the record and say I do not support, once again denying residents a public hearing. Changed or no, how many are not here because they were told their opinion means nothing? This is wrong and it has to stop. No more agenda roulette. You're gambling with your constituents' lives and their rights. Vote to uphold this appeal and stop playing games with the public. Thank you.
Audrey Johnson and then Bill Newman.
Good morning. My name is Audrey Johnson. I'm a resident of Lowry Hill East. I live at 2525 DuPont Avenue South. And as a former member of the school board and the planning commission, I speak in support of the appeal under consideration. Minneapolis has a shortage of affordable housing. This is one of the most segregated cities in this country. We also have one of the worst achievement gaps as well. Many studies illustrate it all goes hand in hand. Residential segregation and the lack of affordable housing continues racial inequality and keeps the achievement gap at a level that is unacceptable. It is shameful that our city is so segregated. It is classic institutionalized racism in housing policy. One scholar, Richard Rothstein, author of the report, The Making of Ferguson, and a research associate of the Economic Policy Institute, maintains that in many cities, segregation is largely government-sponsored, and it would appear that it is so in this city as well. Because housing decisions in my neighborhood are being made not with disenfranchised children in mind, but with what the market will bear. The current course of events continues the status quo. The council is allowing the destruction of affordable, historic housing in my neighborhood to make way for cheaply constructed mid and high-end housing, effectively keeping our neighborhood racially segregated and benefiting developers. Raising 8 homes in such a small area over 14 months is alarming enough. But building Bender boxes, which our neighborhood has become to call them, destroying affordable housing, replacing it with white housing in a white part of town, keeps housing segregation alive and well. And we don't need any more of that. It is time to expose the hypocrisy in this housing practice. Actions speak much louder than words. And if you deny this appeal, you continue the status quo. Residential segregation remains firmly entrenched. The achievement gap stays firmly in place. Benderification, as we call it, gets shoved down our throats. We are wedged in with no regard for neighborhood, racial isolation, the achievement gap, the environment, or other issues like parking and livability for the residents of Lowry Hill East. I urge you to uphold this appeal. Thank you.
Bill Newman, followed by Joe Knabely. Is Bill Newman here? Oh, thank you.
Hi, I support the appeal and would like to talk about more responsible development in our neighborhood. It is said the new urbanism was born in Seaside, Florida. This was based on a walkable, less car traffic model and varied housing types, not unlike what we have in the Wedge. One major difference is that Seaside had very strict design guidelines for all its housing types, which made for a much more successful and pleasant neighborhood. The presented plans were adhered to and the appropriate scale of building was kept. With the motif development at 2316 Colfax, developers presented and requested a variance to allow open porches on the Colfax side to at least repeat the rhythm of scale of the other front porches of the existing housing. I thought this was an appropriate gesture and at least lessen some of the sting from the very contentious teardown of the Orth House. When motif was built, there were no porches. When I asked my elected official why would the developer present was not carried out, I was laughed at and told that she had no control over what was actually built. I think it's only fair to expect what's presented. The same developer was doing 2008 Bryant, put a horrendously out of scale building on a single lot at 2749 DuPont.
Yeah, thank you.
Is market rate hence not affordable to most renters and is an eyesore that could adversely affect the surrounding property, which is significant seeing how property is the greatest and most relied upon asset for most middle-class folks. So it's not favorable to renters or homeowners. It seems to only favor the developer who plunked down the cheapest construction and is reaping maximum rents. There is a compromise for more density on these single lots. It only takes a bit more creativity. I've been fortunate enough to have traveled extensively and seen how desirable neighborhoods and world cities have held to strict and appropriate guidelines to maintain the integrity of the area, which is, after all, what makes the area desirable and draws people to it. When something larger is put in, it is almost always architecturally stunning. While these strategies may cost a bit more, I do not feel it's the city or the neighborhood's responsibility to improve the developer's bottom line. The area is in demand, so if pushed, developers can and would put in better quality and scale buildings. Here are some photos taken in the Wedge and Echo neighborhood. One has been on the building for over 40 years. The front is maintained, so it keeps the character of the block intact, but a large addition is put on the back of the house. It can be made very energy efficient and redesigned. With the addition on the back, it could easily create a sixplex, better than nearly fourplex on DuPont. I don't think the overall cost would be much higher than new construction. What it would do is keep the streetscape intact and be much less in the landfill. Both doable goals, especially for a city that wants zero waste. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Knabely, followed by Leo Whitescheid. Mr. Knabely, please give your address.
My name is Joe Knabely. I live at 2533 Colfax Avenue South. And I support the appeal filed by Jim Boyle. As a strong supporter of green building and smart growth movements, I would like to point out how the proposal to demolish 2008 Bryant does not adhere to several of the core tenets of smart growth, nor does this tear-down mentality protect the environment. The Environmental Protection Agency's definition of smart growth is: smart growth covers a range of development and conservation strategies that help protect our health and natural environment and make our communities more attractive, economically stronger, and more socially diverse. First, as supported by recent studies, rehabbing of sound existing structures using proven green building strategies is a much more effective way to protect the environment than tearing down existing structures and replacing them with buildings that lack the implementation of substantial green building practices. In looking at the plans for the proposed building at 2008 Bryant, I failed to find any green strategies incorporated into the project to justify the wasting of the embedded energy already in 2008 by depositing it in a lock, stock, and barrel into the landfill. Second, one core tenet of smart growth is creating a range of housing opportunities and choices that result in attracting diverse groups of people. Diverse communities are smart, healthy communities. The current tear-down model being used in Lowry Hill East is based on attracting one demographic of the population, young urban professionals.
Can you wrap up, Mr. Knavely, please?
Pardon me?
Can you wrap up?
Yes. Tearing down diverse sounding structures, existing structures, and replacing them with one type of housing is not smart growth. It is a tunnel vision strategy based on density and profit. Rather than being a method to create strong neighborhoods and communities, it is a way to ensure future stratification of wealth in one age group in Lowry Hill East. Thank you.
Next, Leo Whiteshide, and then followed by Bernadette Knavely. Mr. Whiteshide, I apologize if I...
Hi there. My name is Leo Whitebird. I
Thank
am
you.
at 2825 Harriet Avenue South. I'm here to support my fellow members of MRRDC and Neighborhoods United in support of this appeal. This project is emblematic of the city's love affair with developers and headlong rush into irresponsible development. Once again, we're seeing the voices of neighborhood groups being shut out. It just keeps happening. It's happening down our block. The item that's not going to get is going to be on the consent agenda later. It's another example of something that got railroaded. The residents got railroaded. We were not given time to react to it. I salute the Neighborhoods United for being as together as they are in this appeal, and we share many of their concerns. And I think it's time for the city to really reevaluate its development policies, because the citizens are getting screwed. And I guess that's all I have to say. I would ask in closing that you please consider removing the items on 29th and Harriet from the consent agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitebird. Bernadette Knavely, followed by Constance Pepin. Ms. Knavely?
Yes. Hi, my name is Bernadette Knavely. I live at 2741 Bryant Avenue South. I do support the appeal filed by Jim Boyle, and I would like to specifically speak to the lack of landscape buffer on the south lot line in this plan from the point of view of it as an environmentalist. Not only is the buffer absent, but the plan shows a complete disregard for the importance of green space in this neighborhood. I noted in the plan a totality of 2 shrubs. I cannot stress enough the importance of maintaining and enhancing a healthy urban ecosystem. Human needs for greenery, quiet, and fresh air dovetail with the necessary vegetation to provide food, protection, and nesting sites for the wildlife in our neighborhood. I am talking about places for worms and mushrooms and robins and pollinators, trees, grasses, insects, fruits, birds, and humans. Green space is an essential element of a high quality of life in a community. We in this neighborhood have a right to demand inclusion of green space in all real estate developments. Even small tracts of green space are essential to preserve. They are not negligible. They are not expendable. I really would like to see the city of Minneapolis take a lead and actually implement considerations that specifically address the inclusion of significant green space in developments in our neighborhood and citywide in every project. Thank you.
Thank you. Constance Pepin, and then Paul Ryan. Ms. Pepin?
4031 Zenith Avenue South. I'm here to support the appeal. Approval of this project is will be yet another example of how you are allowing and even enabling developers to profit at the expense of residents and neighborhoods and livability in our city. For example, the staff report says it would be impractical to manage stormwater on the site. Hence, the city approves dumping all the stormwater into the street. If there isn't already a state law against allowing this increase in runoff and pollution, it's still wrong for the city to condone dumping stormwater into the street. It's just wrong. The footprint of the building should be smaller to allow for stormwater management on the site. Another example is parking. Just passing the parking problem that you created onto the neighborhood. Your body has changed the law to allow this ridiculously inadequate parking, yet you are still responsible for the problems that the developer is passing onto the neighborhood in the form of congestion, illegal parking, traffic, and emissions. Other people have talked about the garbage problem, the lack of screening, the environmental concerns. These are just another example of how part of the problem that the city council is functioning as an autocracy and basically arrogantly saying, you know better than all of us combined, and you're just going to destroy all of our neighborhoods, defund our neighborhood organizations, and sit there texting while I'm testifying, which is really, you know, people paid hundreds of dollars to come here today and be heard. And the only only significant eye contact I've seen is from one individual here, while most of the time there's been side conversations and texting going on and almost a blatant disregard for what people are saying. And I think it's really wrong for elected officials to act this way, especially after we've gone through the appeal process.
Stick to the topic of the public hearing.
Hey, it was hard to come today. It was hard to come knowing today that you will rubber stamp this proposal, knowing that the motion to deny the appeal has already been written, and you've probably even planned in advance who will make that motion to deny this appeal. As I mentioned, it's really disrespectful to your constituents as an elected body not to be listening to us, to really put aside your phones and your texting and to listen to us. And at a minimum, you owe some discussion after the testimony ends rather than just this motion going through like it has on many occasions.
Can you wrap up, please, Ms. Piven?
Yes, I will. Please start listening to your constituents and value their voices as much as you value developers' money. Grant the appeal and send this proposal back to the developers rather than letting them dump stormwater, traffic problems, and other problems on residents while developers profit at the expense of the people who pay the taxes here. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Ryan followed. You know, I think I have people signed up for the last item on the agenda. Okay, so I'm going to kind of look at addresses and then I'll go back. Paul Ryan, and then I'm looking at Chris Martinson after that. Mr. Ryan.
Paul Ryan, I live at 1934 Aldrich Avenue South, so just about a block away from this proposed development, and I support the appeal largely from an affordability standpoint, but also from the inadequate parking. 2 parking spaces for 10 units is ridiculous. From an affordability standpoint, we're moving more affordable housing out of the neighborhood, and I think that's something we really need to look at. We're looking at it as a city, affordable housing, if it really is important citywide. This is a specific instance in a specific neighborhood where we can help keep affordable housing in the neighborhood. And I really support the appeal and support looking at ways of keeping structures that are already there, maintaining in the neighborhood, and those structures that are already there, the structure that's there has the affordable housing, the new ones do not. So in conclusion, I support the appeal and encourage the city to really look at affordable housing and not just speak about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Chris Martinson, followed by Cynthia Wong.
My name is Chris Martinson, and I reside at 2930 Harriet. I support the appeal for 2008 Bryant because I believe the city of Minneapolis needs to incorporate the rationale of residents into any zoning changes that are implemented by the city's comprehensive plan. In our neighborhood, we are experiencing a similar situation. I represent a large group of people in my neighborhood. We contacted Lisa Bender, Barb Johnson, and Lisa Steiner this week to request that BZZ 7587, the 2905 Harriet Avenue development, be taken off the consent agenda today. We have come across a matter of grave concern that was revealed outside of the 10-day appeal period. We have reason to believe that
Ms. Martinson, are you talking about?
I am speaking to the appeal in relationship to our experiences.
Okay, please.
And this relates
to
the appeal.
Subject, if you would.
We
please,
have reason to believe.
2008 Bryant.
We have reason to believe that state statute 473.859 is legally protecting collusion between entities of the city of Minneapolis, council members, and developers. State statute 473.859 abdicates the representation of city council members to their constituents. Minneapolis only holds hearings like the one we are at today because they are required by state statute 462.357. This statute does not require that the city address the disagreements the citizens have with the city's ordinances when the city is approving zoning changes. There is the possibility that state statute 473.859 and state statute 462.357 are in disagreement with each other. There is the question of whether state statute 473.859 is against the law of statute 462.357.
Ms. Martinson, can you wrap up, please?
Yep. The text of state statute 473.859 was changed in 2007, 2014, and 2015. My neighbors and I request that all consent items on today's agenda be declined, or the consent agenda items be taken off.
We've already dealt with that, Ms. Martinson,
Right, okay.
so please wrap up.
We request that all current development be halted until the text of state statute 473.859 and the changes in the state statute of this state statute can be examined in the context of the implementation of the city's comprehensive
Your time is
plan.
up, Ms. Martinson.
There is reason to believe that this state statute
Your time
allows.
is up, Ms. Martinson. I'm going to call on the next person, Cynthia Wong.
This is very important.
Then please submit your remarks to the clerk. We need to
There
get
is
through this
reason
public
to
hearing.
believe that this state statute allows for a type of eminent domain.
Ms. Martinson,
Furthermore,
your
we
time is up.
request that before there is any further development in the city of Minneapolis, an amendment is added to the city's comprehensive plan that addresses citizens'
Ms. Martinson, your
observations
time
of
is up.
violations of the city's ordinances and the orderly development of the city. I just want to make a public statement. I was referencing this state statute this morning for this meeting, and this state statute was changed.
Okay, thank you.
On the state's website. I do have a copy of the state statute, the text of the state statute. I have that copy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Next is Cynthia Wong, and followed by Connie Lindor. Ms. Wong.
My name is Cynthia Wong. I live at 2932 Harriet Avenue South, and we are undergoing the same type of problem in our neighborhood, only our development is 111 units. I'm here to support the appeal, and just everything that people have been saying are things that I agree with and things that I would have said too, so I'll make it short and just say that I support the appeal.
Thank you. Connie Lindor. Ms. Lindor?
Yes. Hey, I live at 2418 Bryant Avenue South, and I support the appeal. I don't know if I have anything more to add, but I would just urge everyone to not grant variances. I think that we could have prevented the motif development had variances not been granted. And I do have a question for Nate. Actually, are you going to own?
I'm sorry, ma'am.
Can I ask Nate a question?
If you'd like to, if you're through
Yeah,
speaking, then you can go ask him a question.
Okay.
So, but not for
right
the
on.
public hearing.
Oh, really?
Have a
Okay.
conversation.
Yeah, I guess I just want to try to understand the viability of all of these developments, I guess, because again, the motif, I mean, apparently only 4 apartments out of 41 are even occupied at this point. And so I guess I would urge the developer to really look at that and to question their pro forma and their economic model before going ahead. And personally, I just think it's just not cool. So
Thank you. I'm going to look at the page 3. Bob Roscoe, are you here to testify about this? Bob Roscoe, followed by Meredith Gill. Mr. Roscoe.
Good morning, Council President Johnson and members of the committee. I have been involved in historic preservation for 44 years, and I think I've got a good basis to make some comments on. And I think that the council and staff has generally performed, I think, ably for the city of Minneapolis, but there are occasions like this, and that's why I'm here. The possibility to expand the wedge historic district, or the possibility to wrap part of it with with a conservation district, which I really think is advisable, I think means that this property should be kept rather than demolished, and I think that the proposed development would be inappropriate. The fact that the house has stucco, I don't think exempts it from historic preservation consideration. The Fifth Street Historic District has a couple stucco houses in it, and many houses that have a masonite type siding. So I think that this property is a worthy contributor to a district. And its demolition is just chipping away at the integrity of the wedge, which really is a very solid architectural, cohesive neighborhood. And I think the development can be market oriented and profit oriented, and much of development, I don't have to remind all of you, does happen that way, but usually within the appropriate guidelines that I think can happen with this property, but with a different development. When I was involved in the Milwaukee Avenue development in the early 70s in the Seward West neighborhood, we rallied a lot of our residents to support us by pointing towards the wedge for what were called blockbuster apartment buildings. And it's really sad to see that there's just this continues today. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Roscoe. Next, Meredith Gill and Beth Harrington after that. Ms. Gill?
Hi, Meredith Gill, 2012 Bryant Avenue South. I own and live in the property directly to the south of this proposed development. I absolutely support the appeal for all the reasons that people have said before. I'd also like to add that I'm a realtor with extensive property management experience, and the trash removal here is absolutely ridiculous, what they've proposed. People have spoken about how there is not nearly enough trash cans, and especially places for organics at this point. But what we're not discussing is the fact that this is rental housing, and rental housing produces a lot more trash than regular owner-occupied homes, because people are coming and with moving boxes all the time. People are dumping couches, mattresses, stuff like that. Where is this stuff going to go? Is it going to end up in my front yard? This is a disingenuous plan at best. I'm very bothered by the sound barrier or lack thereof with regard to the rooftop deck. But even more, the current building that is there has parking spaces for everyone who currently lives there. They're rapidly diminishing the amount of parking spaces that will exist and bringing in much more density. And I don't have a personal problem with density. However, they're taking away parking area, adding more people to what is a bike boulevard that is already over congested with cars. Not infrequently, I would say probably on average 10 times a year, I have to call 311 multiple times because somebody is parked in front of my driveway because there's inadequate parking. Adding this amount of parking or of residency and taking away existing parking is going to be a huge problem that will diminish the quality of residents also to use this street as a bike boulevard. Finally, I would like to say that when the new owners of this building bought it, I reached out to contact them for over 4 months. I called the property manager over 20 times and left many messages saying, we share this driveway. Can we please talk about snow removal so we can split the cost, as I had been doing with the former owners. I had to take out a contract on my own, pay for it on my own, and then only after I sent a letter threatening legal action did I finally hear from the owner and get reimbursed. This is an incredibly rude.
Can you finish up, please?
Yeah, this sucks.
Thank you. Ezra Gray. Oh, I'm sorry. Beth Harrington and then Ezra Gray. I'm sorry, Beth Harrington and then Ezra Gray. Beth Harrington.
My name is Beth Harrington. I live at 2804 Fremont Avenue South. I'm here in support of the appeal by Minneapolis Neighbors United. I speak as a resident that lives directly across from the Girard Avenue Apartments, which is the last development by the Levin Perkins developers. And I speak from the experience thus far. They're about 8 months into this project, and it's slated for opening or renting this summer. The question that I raised to this committee and the City Planning Commission as a whole is what kind of follow-up is there going to be to the concerns that the neighbors have raised. My neighbors, raised many of the same concerns that are being raised about the 2008 Bryant project, specifically parking, traffic, unloading and rental properties, loading and unloading zones, and rooftop gardens, the noise that would add to the neighborhood. So my question is who follows up after these projects are approved? We wonder, will anybody be coming out to our neighborhood 6 months, 9 months, 12 months afterwards to find out if the concerns of the neighbors have been borne out? What we anticipate, my neighbors and I, when this apartment complex opens this summer, is that we'll be frequently calling our 311 app on our phones to remove cars that are blocking our alley or to complain about noise, or that we will have to get traffic cones to put in our parking places because we are quite sure that it's going to be used and blocked on a regular basis. So my question here is about follow-up. Isn't part of the planning process, a good planning process, follow-up? What kind of follow-up is the City Planning Commission doing to find out what is the reality of these projects 6 months, year, 18 months down the line?
Thank you. Ezra Gray.
Good morning.
Gray.
I'm Ezra Gray. I live at 2109 Bryant on the same block as 2008, right across the street. I've heard and read a lot of remarks about this particular issue, 2008, primarily in the way that it's unfolded. It's kind of unusual. There wasn't really much input submitted at first, just a couple letters, and then a couple of people showed up to the consent hearing. I was one of them, but we found out that it had already. I got here at 4:38, and it started at 4:30, and found out that it had already been approved on the consent agenda. So there was nothing further to do. And I think part of this is a lot of us, we're not sure about how to go about presenting our input now. If you recall last year, just within weeks of taking her office, our council member said in the press first that our neighborhood groups, because they are composed largely of longtime homeowners, no longer represented the neighborhood. This is soon followed by comments that the neighborhood groups were unnecessarily hindering development because they didn't actually have any decision-making authority. Immediately after the second comment last year, I attended a meeting of the Lowry Hill East Planning Committee. That night, a representative from one of the new management companies on the Greenway was there to show everyone this new marquee that was planned for the exterior of a new apartment building on the Greenway. After the presentation, one of the planning committee members suggested that they take a moment to discuss the proposal. And at that point, the management representative said to them, in effect, I don't think you understand. We're not here asking for your consideration of this. We're telling you what we're going to do. And that was basically that was last year. That was basically the last Lena meeting we even attended. We were so disheartened until yesterday we finally went to the annual meeting. Things are going to change. We know things are going to change. We know we can't save every house. Some of us have maybe accepted this a little more easily than others have, myself included. But it seems like right now we need to communicate more than ever. We got to come to an understanding of the homeowners, where our place in this process is, and we're going to be able to participate going forward.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I've gotten through the list of people to speak, but I'm going to read some of the names of the other people that have signed up, and maybe for the other item. So Dean I'm saying it wrong, Rizet, Dean at Bank Street. I assume that's for the other development. Mary Reiser at Bank Street. For the other item? Okay. Joanne.
Joanne Netlin. I signed over here. I thought that
For the other. Okay. Tell me how to say your name again. I'm sorry. Netlin. Okay. Okay. All right. For the other item. Okay. Great. Thank you. We'll call on you for the other item. Barbara Glazer. Other item.
Yes.
And Bill Griffith. I assume you're for the other item. All right. And then I have HOBBOD 110 Southeast and Ray or something Lent. Okay, I'm going to assume that's for the other one. And then Lynette Whitsack Stangline for the other item. Okay. All right. So we have gone through our list in the public hearing for the property at 2008 Bryant Avenue South, a site plan appeal. Anyone else care to speak that hadn't signed up? Anyone else care to speak? Seeing none, I'll close. Ma'am, you'd like to speak? Go ahead. Okay, your name and your address, please.
Okay, my name is Linda Hoon, that's spelled H-U-H-N. I own and live in the duplex at 2553 DuPont Avenue South since 1977, however many years that is. I took this old house and stripped woodwork and replumbed and everything. I did everything. Okay, to me, what I see happening here is, the basis of neighborhoods is families. And I have talked with people that live in the neighborhood, maybe a young couple or so, and I said, well, are you going to buy a house here? Oh, no, we could never afford to live in the wedge. Well, what does that mean? I mean, is our neighborhood going to be a neighborhood where there aren't families, where nobody owns a house anymore? Because people who own a house and raise their family there, fix up the property, they pass it along. They have their kids, their dog, their yard, and it's safe. Neighborhoods where there are families are neighborhoods that are safe. And it would seem to me that would be a desirable thing to have in our neighborhood. We will always have renters. We will always have apartment buildings. We're not going to get rid of them. But it seems to me that the city of Minneapolis should stop being anti-family. That really, I don't have any kids. I don't have a family. But it really bothers me that I see families moving out and other families not moving in, people dying, and then somebody buys the property and rents it. So I think we should think more about families. Thank you.
Anyone else care to speak? Anyone else care to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. And let's see if we have a motion. Councilmember Goodman, or questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have some questions for staff.
All right.
Could you put up the picture of the house next to the one that showed the very first picture you had up? The house next to the bigger house next to the. Okay, so I'm just wondering. Yep, that's perfect. So that fire escape, are people out on that fire escape at the building next door? And do people use that for like a rooftop terrace? And that's how it's used in my ward when you have a fire escape like that. So did you go out and look at that and see if that was something that was similar to but lower down than a rooftop?
I'm not aware if it's heavily used in the warmer months. It might be a better thing for the applicant to address. You're talking about the property to the north?
I think it's to the north. Yeah, so is the owner of the property to the north? I thought you were the owner of the property to the south. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm talking about the property to the north, the apartment building that looks like the Wellington in my ward. In my ward, which is pretty dense. Okay. Okay. Right, so I'm just trying to get a sense of whether or not that balcony is exclusively ingress and egress, or it's one that's used for sitting outside or maybe smoking or grilling or that kind of thing. So I guess if our staff can't answer that question and the young lady who has the house next door could, I'd ask the chair's permission to ask her to address that issue.
Why don't you come up, please? I've forgotten your name now, I'm sorry.
Meredith Gill.
Okay.
So actually, So you can see that the house that they're attempting to demolish is set back, but then even behind that, there's a large parking area currently. So from my driveway, I see straight into the area that you're discussing all the time. And so people sometimes lock their bikes up there. There are no smoking signs on it. They're not allowed to smoke on it. I've lived there for 3.5 years. I see people coming in and out, but I've never had any issue with noise whatsoever. And it's not a place that people typically congregate. A few people have plants out there, and that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So back to staff. Just so Ms. Pepin knows, I don't have a phone. I don't really use any kind of social media. And I was asking staff in Public Works the question about how we handle multi-unit buildings of 4 units or more and their trash. Because I, for 20 years, lived in a building that was 16 units plus 3 commercial units. And how we handled the trash was there were 3 recycling bins, exactly as the ones we use in single-family homes, and 1 dumpster. And that was for 16 units, a bar, a coffee shop, a restaurant, a hair salon, and 16 individual units. And the total number of recycling we had was 1 dumpster, so fairly more significant than a garbage bin, and 3 recycling bins. So I'm wondering how we did an analysis or what analysis we did, if any, of the garbage and recycling situation, because it would seem to me as though they would probably be required to pick up garbage more than once a week and recycling every 2 weeks, right? So if they have less, they probably have to pick it up a whole heck of a lot more. Can you explain that to me more fully?
When staff analyze the site plan review for the trash enclosures, we look at the location of the trash enclosure. It's currently in the rear 40 feet or 20% of the lot, which is required if you're in an interior side yard. So that complies for the location. And then we also look at adequate screening. And so one of the conditions of approval for the Planning Commission was that the applicant will have to demonstrate that they are providing a sufficient screen for the trash enclosure. Other than that, trash is outside of our purview. However, Public Works will review the site plan has reviewed it for the trash removal plan and will need to have a fully developed plan from the applicant in order to stamp off on any final permits. And I have also investigated our policy with solid waste and recycling, and we don't have a minimum threshold for the number of bins or recycling bins for an apartment building of this size. So the property owner has the opportunity to contract with the city for this property because they have more than 4 units, so they're not required to use city services, but they have the option to. And when I discussed this with the applicant, they have found that this amount of garbage, waste and recycling bins would be sufficient for a property of this size based on their experience with other properties.
And then would it be picked up on the regular residential schedule of 1 garbage a week, recycling every other week? I'm not sure I understand how composting works. It's every other week also. I mean, I can see where there's a concern with regard to how many bins, what do they look like, how do they get rolled down this shared easement, how often, and I don't understand exactly how it works. And what I'm hearing you say is, well, we don't review that. We just review what the enclosure looks like, and we review whether or not it's landscaped appropriately. It meets those conditions.
Yep, and I can also just add that there's no organics requirement for this building. So I would maybe ask the applicant to describe more about what their plan is for either using city services or not.
Okay, I'll do that at the end then. I'm interested in the 2 shrubs and the landscape buffer. Never in my career on the council have I seen planning not insist on more greening than what is required, but here we don't seem to care. So can you show me the greening plan and this alternative compliance issue? I mean, I just remember when we were building lawns next to my house, we were requiring these ridiculous tree islands and 2 trees in the middle of the parking lot, and we identified every single bush and what it had to be called. And so it looks like we're saying, okay, put in 2 bushes. I could see where that would be a concern.
Okay, so this is the landscape plan that was submitted by the applicant. They're proposing actually 10 shrubs total. The Planning Commission required the addition of 2 shrubs because of the additional screening that's required in the parking lot frontage. So that would be a total of 12, 2 canopy trees. They are exceeding the minimum landscape requirement. So the minimum is 20% of the lot that's not covered by the building. They are providing 36%. And so that's 1,682 square feet of landscaping, where 928 square feet would be required.
So they exceed
the minimum landscape
fairly
requirements.
significantly. And so this understanding that there's 2 shrubs, there's not 2 shrubs, there's 10 shrubs.
There would be 12 as conditions.
12 shrubs, 2 trees.
Yep.
But it exceeds the 20% without question.
Correct.
How about this issue of the fence? The extension of the fence 8 feet. Why didn't we require that?
Because the driveway would be in the way of that. And so they're required to have a 10-foot driveway between where the driveway is and the parking area. So they would be creating their own variance if they shrunk that down below 10 feet.
I see. And they clearly didn't want to apply for any variances, and I can see why. Because this is kind of the dilemma we have now, that if you go for a project that's slightly better, you run up against the opposition of the neighbors, so then you go for something that's worse, knowing you don't need approval for that something that's worse, basically. I mean, they could have probably asked for a variance to make the driveway shorter and put in more landscaping. Then we'd have a variance application in front of us, which is a much higher standard to meet than site plan review. So actually, this developer did what he needed to do to get his project done, and that's allowed. That's capitalism. I mean, that's allowed. It could have probably worked out better if they had tried to use some variances and work with the neighbors to make this a better project, but I can kind of see why they didn't do that. I wish you would have done that, but I can see why you didn't. Okay, so that ticks off my list of questions. They have landscaping in excess of what they are required to have, and it's not just 2 bushes.
Correct.
I would like to hear from the applicant, Madam Chair, with regard to this garbage removal, recycling. Please don't get up and say you're not going to recycle or compost, or you're just going to have another bullet at you.
No, we are. We're basing it off of history. We have
Identify yourself, please.
Danny Perkins. We're basing it off of history. We have numerous other projects that have similar amount of tenants, and we have half the garbage requirement, we have, I think, 4 garbage bins, including recycle bins. So I think this is probably more sufficient than actually, when it comes to reality, we might have 6, but based off of history, they're not using that much garbage. These are 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units. This is not a substantial amount.
Are you?
No, okay. We're not going to have a back and forth, please.
Yes, they say 2-bedroom units, but based off of our history, this is going to be perfect for a couple with an office, with a den, live workspace.
So are you planning on picking up the garbage on the regular residential schedule, or are you having a commercial hauler, and what's the schedule for that?
Yes, we usually have someone that's kind of on-site manager that would take out the garbage and the recycling bin and put it for the regular schedule.
So on the regular schedule, once a week for garbage, every other week for recycling.
Right.
And you believe that will be adequate given the number of bins you have?
Yes, and I mean, we're not flippers. We don't sell these properties, so we try to have a good relationship with neighbors, and we're holding these properties on for a long time. If we do see that there is an issue, we will make sure that we have a dumpster there. We'll make sure we'll eliminate a parking space, whatever it takes to make sure that it's not a nuisance for the neighbors. But based off of the experience, this should be sufficient.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins.
Those are the questions that I had. I don't know if anyone else has any questions.
Any other committee members have questions? Seeing none, motions in order.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't feel that great, but I've paid a lot of attention to this. I've had a lot of communication on this issue, and I've been actively involved in a number of issues in this neighborhood, including the opposition to the demolition of the Orth House. But this building, to me, does not seem to meet any kind of historic significance. And if it did, someone would have nominated it as historically significant, and there wasn't a nomination, and so I don't think we have the ability to tell them that they can't tear down their house to build something that they want that meets the plan as set out by the city pretty much exactly. I mean, this is an R6 zoning district. An R6 zoning district in the 7th Ward would also see an extremely highly dense project, even if it was immediately next to residential. I have 2 of them going on right now on West Lake Street, and another few within the neighborhoods in Lowry Hill. When you have that high level of zoning, that is a risk. That's why a rezoning study, a small area plan, or a preservation or conservation district seems to make the most sense in this location. I will say that I have a major concern about the way this was handled at the Planning Commission, and I have emailed back and forth with Mr. Wittenberg about 5 times now on this issue. And we are not the Planning Commission. We appoint some of the members of the Planning Commission. The mayor's office appoints some of the members. They have their own chair, and they handle things their way. But Madam President, I do think it is completely unfair to put an item with concern on consent when there's a public hearing requirement. And here Mr. Wurtenberg concluded that there was a public hearing requirement because there were 10 units or more, yet it was put on consent. And then people come, it's item number 3. Often these planning commission meetings take like 4 hours, so I can understand where they wouldn't be there exactly at 4:30. If you were in my committee, you should come exactly on time because we run everything on time. But at the planning commission, that sometimes can't happen. It just seems so unfair, and I can see why people are mad about it. And that's why I'm happy you allowed the applicant here to speak for as long as he wanted, because this is your opportunity to speak in front of anyone who can make a decision. And I don't think it's Councilmember Bender's fault either. She's one member of a planning commission of a number of people, and I think if she had known that this is something that people wanted to talk about, she might have been able to flag it. And I don't think this is not an appropriate time to be criticizing anyone on the council. The bottom line is she doesn't run the planning commission. She's not the chair. And so their process is not one that she can control. This process here today is a process that she can control. Unfortunately, she had surgery, which is why she's not here, which I think is a legitimate reason for not being here today. And it's why I'm here sick, because there was a notice of a public hearing and there was a quorum requirement. And that's why I'm sitting up here coughing and sneezing through this. So sometimes that happens. In the end, on the issue of rental versus ownership, we don't get to decide that. We don't get to tell developers we want it to be ownership versus rental, nor do we have any ability to mandate that they put in affordable housing in any of these buildings. No one cares more about the loss of naturally occurring affordable housing in this city than me and Councilmember Reich, who have worked on my committee for a long time to try to save affordable housing throughout the city. And we don't have any ability to mandate that as much as I would like to do that. So I do think these are legitimate overall big picture issues: preservation, rental versus ownership, affordable versus market rate. But in the end, this is an R6 district. They are allowed to build this level of density, probably more would be my guess, maybe not based on the site. They seem to have met the greening requirement. They didn't want to file a variance because they knew they'd face this kind of opposition and might not have gotten the variance, so they went about a plan that was completely legally allowed without any permission in order to avoid this kind of controversy, and unfortunately you got it anyway, so let that be a lesson to you for all these other properties you own in the wedge going forward. This is nothing compared to the opposition you'll probably face going forward. This is probably the beginning of a very large steamrolling situation in this neighborhood where people are just frickin' fed up, and I understand it. And I understand it with regard to the way they've been treated. But ultimately, I don't see a legitimate way for any of us to say, no, they can't do this. This is a site plan approval. It's not a variance, a rezoning, a CUP. Many of you who I've worked with know this. But I think speaking out on this issue in the context of the broader issues was your right to do today in front of us. And I commend you for taking that opportunity. And I hope the Planning Commission will have the opportunity to pay more attention when people are upset. It doesn't kill them to listen to people being upset, because they have the ability overall to create and suggest policy on overall zoning and planning issues in the city. With that, I'll move to deny the appeal.
Councilmember Goodman has moved to deny the appeal. Any discussion by committee members? Seeing none, clerk, call the roll.
Councilmember Warsame?
Aye.
Goodman?
Aye.
Reich?
Aye.
B. Johnson?
Aye.
That's 4.
The appeal is denied. Next item we have on the agenda is a discussion item regarding environmental assessment worksheet for proposed lattice development at 200 Central Avenue Southeast and 113 2nd Street Southeast. Staff report.
Council President Johnson, members of the committee, I'm Hillary Dvorak and I represent Community Planning and Economic Development. This is an environmental, a petition for an environmental assessment worksheet was submitted and forwarded to the city on April 5th.
Madam Chair.
Are we having trouble hearing?
I would suggest we wait till a quorum is present to consider the matter.
I'm sorry. Okay. We had a long public hearing. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bussey. We'll wait. I didn't realize people had walked out. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Ms. Dvorak, thank you.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Council President Johnson, members of the committee, I'm Hillary Dvorak and I represent CPED. On April 5th, 2016, the city of Minneapolis received a petition forwarded from the Minnesota Environmental Quality Board that had been filed by Neighbors for East Bank Livability requesting the preparation of an environmental assessment worksheet for the project known as the Aladdis Tower, located at 200 Central Avenue Southeast and 113 2nd Street Southeast. The EQB determined that the city of Minneapolis is the appropriate responsible governmental unit for the decision on the petition. The EQB published the notice in the EQB Monitor on April 11th, 2016, and the city was assigned as the RGU. The applicant is proposing to demolish the existing structures on the property and construct a new 40-story mixed-use building. The building would include a total of 207 dwelling units, 6,700 square feet of ground floor retail space, and 333 parking spaces. The site is located in the St. Anthony Falls Historic District. A certificate of appropriateness is required to allow the proposed demolition of the structures on the property, and a separate certificate of appropriateness is required for the proposed new construction. Both of these applications will be required to be reviewed by the Heritage Preservation Commission. The project is also subject to review by the Planning Commission. Several land use applications will be required for the proposed development, including a conditional use permit to increase height and a variance to increase the maximum FAR. A travel demand management plan that analyzes traffic and parking operations in the immediate area will also be required for the project. The TDMP will be reviewed by the city's Department of Public Works and CPED. The petitioners state that the project is subject to a mandatory EAW under Minnesota Rules, Part 4410.4300, Subpart 19C. This rule states that in cities that are located in the 7-county Twin Cities metropolitan area that have adopted a comprehensive plan under Minnesota statutes, the threshold for a mandatory EAW is 150 attached units if the project is not consistent with the city's adopted comprehensive plan. The petitioners state that the project meets this threshold based on the size of the project and its inconsistency with the with the adopted comprehensive plan, specifically chapters 1, land use, 8, heritage preservation, and 10, urban design. The petitioners also state that the project is inconsistent with the St. Anthony Falls Historic Design Guidelines. However, these guidelines are not part of the city's comprehensive plan. The rules provide that the designated RGU shall order the preparation of an EAW if the evidence presented by the petitioners demonstrates that because of the nature or location of the proposed project, the project may have the potential for significant environmental effects. The RGU shall deny the petition if the evidence presented fails to demonstrate that the project may have the potential for significant environmental effects. The petitioners cite 5 areas of concern that they believe will result in the potential for significant environmental effects should the project be constructed. These include damage to adjacent historic structures, visual impacts and shadowing of historic properties, traffic impacts, noise and dust, and cumulative impacts of development. The following factors must be considered today. First, the type, extent, and reversibility of environmental effects. The environmental effects identified in the petition are visual, localized, and can be mitigated through the city's formal development review process. This process captures and evaluates development proposals not only from a planning perspective, but also includes evaluations by the Public Works Department, the Construction Code Services Division of CPED related to building code review and inspections during and after the completion of the project, and the various utility companies. The identified effects are reversible until the final discretionary approvals for the proposed project are granted through the city's development review process. The project will require city approvals, including but not limited to the Heritage Preservation Commission and the City Planning Commission. Through both of these review processes, the Heritage Preservation Commission will evaluate the project for compliance with the St. Anthony Falls Historic District Design Guidelines and the Comprehensive Plan. In addition, the City Planning Commission will evaluate the project for compliance with the zoning ordinance and also the Comprehensive Plan. The second factor to consider is cumulative potential effects of related or anticipated future projects. All future development within the area will be considered through the city's development review process. This has and will continue to allow the city to manage potential cumulative effects of future development within the vicinity and throughout the city as a whole. The third factor to consider is the extent to which the environmental effects are subject to mitigation by ongoing public regulatory authority. The city's development review process is comprehensively administered by city staff and implemented by experienced commissioners and the city council. Any potential environmental effects are mitigated by the city's development review process. The last factor to consider is the extent to which environmental effects can be anticipated and controlled as a result of other applicable environmental studies undertaken by public agencies or the project proposer, including other environmental impact statements. A project of this type within an urban setting is neither unique nor unanticipated. Residential, commercial, and mixed-use developments that have been significantly more intense than the proposed project have been the subject of EAWs and EISs, as well as the city's development review process. Based on these studies, the environmental effects of this project can be anticipated and controlled by the city's development review process. It is undisputed today that the proposed number of dwelling units within the project exceeds 150 attached units. There are 207 attached units proposed. However, the project is in compliance with the city's comprehensive plan and therefore does not meet any of the mandatory EAW thresholds. The Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth identifies the site as mixed use on the future land use map. The site is also located in the East Hennepin Activity Center and is located along Central Avenue Northeast, which is a designated community corridor in this location. In the comprehensive plan, the mixed-use designation allows for mixed-use development, including mixed use with residential. Mixed use may include either a mix of retail, office, or residential uses within a building or within a district. The proposed use of the project is consistent with the future land use guidance of the comprehensive plan. In the comprehensive plan, activity centers are designated as places with a mix of uses that have citywide and regional draw. They contain a high intensity of uses. Densities in activity centers range between high density, which is 50 to 120 dwelling units per acre, and very high density, which is 120 to 200 dwelling units per acre, depending on the context. In addition, densities up to 800 dwelling units per acre may be allowed in or near all designated growth centers and within activity centers adjacent to growth centers as consistent with adopted small area plans. The proposed density of the project is 259 dwelling units per acre, which is consistent with the policy guidance in the comprehensive plan. The petitioner's arguments are based on general and aspirational components of the city's comprehensive plan. The alleged inconsistencies with the comprehensive plan relate to judgments about character and compatibility. The city of Minneapolis concludes the following. The findings of fact and record of decision document and related documentation were prepared in compliance with the procedures of the Minnesota Environmental Policy Acts and Minnesota rules. The project does not meet any of the mandatory EW thresholds contained in the Minnesota rules. The project is in compliance with the city's comprehensive plan. The project does not have the potential for significant environmental effects. The petitioners failed to meet their burden of proof that the project may have the potential for significant environmental effects. Although there are many arguments presented, they are largely anecdotal and unsupported by compelling evidence. The city of Minneapolis makes the finding that the petition for the EEW for the Lattice Tower project on the property located at 200 Central Avenue Southeast and 113 2nd Street Southeast is denied. The city of Minneapolis City Council shall adopt the proposed findings of fact and record of decision document. And I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bork. Any questions from committee members? We've been joined by Councilmember Fry. Seeing none, this action does not require a public hearing, but I'm going to allow 15 minutes for people to speak on either side of the issue. So I would start with the list that I have. So I'll keep track. People should keep to perhaps 2 minutes each. Again, I think that's a reasonable thing, and that'll accommodate the people that we have signed in. So I'm going to start. Mr. Griffith?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Bill Griffith representing the petitioners. My remarks are a little bit longer than 2 minutes, and they're substantive, and so I think they should be presented in the record. The rest of the group will keep their remarks short, but they've hired me to represent them and present testimony.
Then, Mr. Griffith, then I'm going to suggest that all of your people together then would limit their remarks to about 8 minutes, and then so you take the time that you need within that 8 minutes, please.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Griffith.
You'd like me to start?
Yes, but why don't you start?
Sounds like a perfect idea. Madam Chair, council members, we do appreciate the courtesy that is given here for this testimony. It is odd, I think, that a petition for an EAW wouldn't have a public hearing, so we appreciate your making the extra step, and Councilmember Fry making the request on our behalf. He's also extended courtesies to the neighborhood to meet with them on several occasions, so that's greatly appreciated. I'll be to the point. Obviously, we have a difference of opinion with your staff, and the reason to file a petition for an EAW is to make sure there's good scrutiny of what is really a massive project on the East Bank. It's without precedent. I think we are well aware of that. It's actually 42 stories in height. If you do some counting, we won't quibble over 2 stories. I think at more than 40 stories, it is significant. Biggest project ever proposed for the East Bank, certainly in terms of height, on a site that's less than 1 acre. It is 8 times greater than the allowed density by your city code. It is 38 stories taller than the 8-story guideline in your historic district, St. Anthony Falls Historic District, that was just adopted in 2012. And we've heard that's just a guideline. But your zoning, your comprehensive plan, and your historic guidelines all work together to create that regulatory framework that I think was mentioned by Councilmember Goodman just a few minutes ago in another hearing. And so those things work together. They aren't pulled apart and one is set aside and the guideline doesn't have precedence or meaning within the comprehensive plan. In fact, it gives life to the very policies for preservation within the comprehensive plan. But it's not just about height. It's about all of the cumulative effects of a project that is massive, not just here, but anywhere in the city. Your comprehensive plan document says to locate the tallest buildings in the city within the downtown core. This is clearly not the downtown core. It's an historic neighborhood. And this would be the 11th tallest building in your city. Think about that. The 11th tallest building in your city, located in the historic birthplace of Minneapolis, that is home to small buildings, two-story townhomes, some other high-rises that were developed in the 80s before your historic regulations took effect. And so a very important neighborhood, a neighborhood that I love to visit. I'm there frequently, not as a resident, but as a visitor. Why? Because it has those unique attributes. And the concern of my clients is not that development will occur. They've enjoyed the development in their neighborhood that's created vitality in a really important neighborhood in the city, but it has to be within the scale of what's there today. So why do this by an EAW? An EAW covers all of the issues that your staff addressed, but it does it in a methodical, independent document, an analysis that everybody can weigh in on through a hearing process that really scrutinizes a project that deserves scrutiny. This is not a project like the last one that completely complies with your city code. In fact, it is way out of scale with the city code. The issue that we've raised is that we believe that an EAW is in fact mandatory by law. And why is it mandatory by law? You cannot define consistency with the comprehensive plan with regard to this project. How do we know that? Again, we go to your zoning code and your historic documents. Those are the tools by which you implement your vision for this neighborhood and others. And one of the concerns we have, it's really a nagging question, because those same documents and regulatory framework seem to operate to limit development in the North Loop, a neighborhood that's immediately adjacent to downtown, to 10 stories. And yet in this case, those very same documents and controls would allow consideration of a 42-story tower. Again, there's no consistency in the application of those regulatory controls. So environmental effects include not just effects on air and water, but also, and importantly in this case, effects on historic resources. There are 3 contributing historic resources that are directly affected. And I know you have an HPC process to review that, but that is also the appropriate consideration for an EAW, okay? So it is not inappropriate that an EAW consider the fact that you have the Pillsbury Library building 16 feet from the base of this massive structure, the Art Godfrey House immediately across Central Avenue, and then the site itself. Your staff has identified as a contributing historic structure. Those are important resources and a valid consideration and concern for an environmental assessment worksheet. I've mentioned that the document itself, I won't repeat all of the things that are in the record in writing, but there are many, many policies that are affected. And the city staff has essentially winnowed those by saying that those concerns that we've raised are general and aspirational, and the concern and the issues that have been identified are specific and applicable. Well, we would disagree. When you do that kind of winnowing, when you have to pick and choose which policies apply and which don't, that's arbitrary by definition. Wouldn't it be better, in fact, to give this project the scrutiny it deserves through an EAW process? What are we afraid of? There is no harm done to the project to ask difficult questions about its effect on the environment. We know that this East Bank area is built on a foundation, a substrata that causes vibration to occur in adjacent buildings. That's in the record. That is actually material evidence that we provided in the record. Those are the kind of scientific considerations that should be considered. This project has some of the highest parking density. Think about it. So if the site is less than an acre and it proposes 414 parking spaces, we're looking at a density of cars of 512 per acre. That is very high density of automobile usage in an area that's already congested with traffic. We know that congested traffic leads to air quality problems. We know that air quality problems affect human health. These are not trumped up concerns. They are concerns that are real and valid and should be addressed. Again, what is the concern about a scrutiny of a project of this size? There shouldn't be. Finally, and I think to the main point, you cannot find this project consistent with your comprehensive plan. Why? Because your comprehensive plan is implemented by your zoning ordinance. Your comprehensive plan is implemented by the historic district guidelines that you all or your predecessors approved in 2012. That document suggests an 8-story height limitation. Why? Because that's what predominates in the area with some exception. So you cannot say that it's consistent with your comprehensive plan if the very documents that implement your comprehensive plan call for a project of a very reduced scale. We have recent experience with the NISE project finally being reduced to a scale that's consistent with the neighborhood, and we ask that you really ultimately decide the same thing here. But finally, we ask, what is the harm in ordering an EAW when it looks to us like it's mandated by law? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith. I'm going to ask if there is anyone from the proposers, developers, that would like to speak, and then we'll see how much time we have left. It looks to me like about 11:30 we're going to wrap up. Ms. Lansing.
Good morning, President Johnson and committee members. I'm Carol Lansing, attorney at Figure Baker Daniels, representing the proposer of the project, Lattice. Bob Lux and Chris Osmondson of Lattice are also here today. Our response to the petition is included in the record, but I would like to summarize the points made in our response and in support of the staff recommendation to deny the petition. First, the project does not exceed any mandatory threshold for an EAW, including the threshold that relates to projects that are not consistent with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan statements that are listed in the petition are not regulatory in nature. They are guidance. Lattice believes that the project is quite consistent with the comprehensive plan and those policy guidance statements, but we note staff concurs in that, but we also note that those statements are interpreted and applied in a subjective manner, and that's exactly why they cannot be the kind of statements or considered rules that can determine whether a project exceeds a mandatory threshold. In contrast, our response gave an example where there can be circumstances where a comprehensive plan includes rules that you can clearly be inconsistent with because they're objective, such as for some cities that have large rural areas, for their land that's designated for rural guidance, they limit density to 1 unit per 5 acres. That's a clear-cut threshold that can be used, not whether something is, as in our plan statements, tend to be appropriate or compatible. The other potential effects, or the potential effects that are cited in the petition are generalized concerns and not the type upon which an EAW should be ordered. And the standard that you are applying is not simply to consider whether it's possible to speculate that a project may have an environmental effect. The petition must also present material evidence that such effects occur and be significant and could be significant. And in evaluating the potential for a significant effect, the city must consider the type of the effect described, the extent to which they are subject to mitigation by the city's processes, and you should also and can also consider relevant information that's been developed in other environmental reviews. The petition lists as types of potential effects construction impacts, and it describes a damage that occurred related to construction on a River Place project over 30 years ago. It only speculates that damage could occur based on this project. In contrast, we have provided a letter from a structural engineer that describes with specificity the many contemporary construction methods and measures that can be utilized to monitor and prevent damage to neighboring properties. Blasting, as occurred with the River Place project, is not going to be involved in this one. Lattice is already in consultation with the Pillsbury Library to keep them apprised of the project, the design, and to have those discussions about monitoring construction impacts. Other construction impacts, noise and dust, are regulated by ordinance and the city's regulatory review processes and permitting. Visual impacts, shadowing, the effect of the project on the character of the historic district and neighborhood and consistency with the HPC guidelines and the city's comprehensive plan statements are the type of impacts and issues that are addressed properly through the city's HPC hearings and the Planning Commission hearings. The petitioners will have the opportunity to participate in those hearings and to provide their perspectives and any information that they believe should be considered in making those decisions. An EAW is not the place or forum for debating or deciding on a project. Whether a project is or isn't consistent with the comprehensive plan is not what an EAW is for. It is simply an informational gathering exercise. And the city's regular processes have and will continue to gather all the necessary information. For example, for major projects in the city, like this one, a TDMP, a travel demand management plan, a traffic and parking study is required as a matter of course at the same level of detail and study that would occur if you did an EAW to a look at traffic impacts. And the city has the regulatory authority to require mitigation, might be signalization or other issues based on the information that it will see in a TDMP. And I'll note, while it has not been submitted, a draft TDMP and traffic study has been prepared, and it indicates that no mitigation should be required. But again, that is a city normal city process. With respect to impacts of increased traffic on air quality, there have been recent EAWs in the area, and that is one of the subjects that you address in an EAW, air quality. And they have found that no actual additional study, no air monitoring or sampling should be required, because the projects studied would generate a relatively small increase in carbon monoxide levels and other vehicle-related air emissions. And examples of those recent studies are for the Superior Plating site, just a few blocks away, where there will be up to 1,000 parking spaces involved, and the Krause-Anderson project in downtown, also high traffic areas, where there will be 520 spaces. So even when an EAW was conducted, in terms of air quality impacts related to traffic, they found nothing worth doing any additional study on because of the amount of traffic in the area. So in conclusion, the petition describes potential effects that are typically anticipated in a development in an urban environment. The city has a comprehensive and sophisticated regulatory process in place to manage those impacts, and the petition does not present material evidence of potential for significant environmental effects that merits any further study. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lansing. Let's hear for two people. So I'll go the first people who have signed in. Dean Reiser. Okay, great. All right. Then Joanne Netlin.
I thought I was just signing.
Okay, great. Thank you. Barbara.
I think I'm it.
Glazer. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Barbara Glazer. I was born and raised in Minneapolis, went to grad school at the University of Minnesota, and then headed out to upstate New York to the Adirondack Mountains and Saratoga Springs, where for 35 years I've been working in the field of historic preservation, running a company that does the adaptive reuse of historic buildings. The Great Camp, Sagamore, and Uncas up in the Adirondacks, and multiple buildings in the historic community of Saratoga Springs. Came back here and was very excited to see the city's 2025 vision for where Minneapolis is going. When I was a kid, the Fauché Tower was the biggest building in the city. And I'm very excited with what's happening and the return of vitality to Minneapolis. In choosing to relocate here, as many Minnesotans do when their folks get elderly and their children come here for med school and have kids, I have now in the process and the last couple of years of relocating to Minneapolis. And in that process, had a chance to read the 2012 guidelines for the St. Anthony Falls District, the story of which is on your walls here, because I wanted to bring both my expertise and my resources and my family to be part of the revitalization of the city through the contribution to the historic districts. My daughter, who's now a pediatrician at the Children's Hospital at the university, lives 2 blocks away in the neighborhood, and my nephew and his wife now have opened Wilson and Willie's, the store over, as they are part of the reinvestment and the development of the North Loop. So it's an exciting time for all of us and our families. I'm here today representing a very diverse collection of people, most of us who have never met each other before until we've come together around a table being concerned about the scale of the Alatus project that's coming in here. And so we represent a variety of buildings, represent a variety of residences, of businesses, and of professional backgrounds and interests as we're coming to express these concerns. So here today, we just want you to know this request for an EAW is a serious request. It's not a superfluous or in any way frivolous delay tactic. This is, as you can see with the picture, going to be the second largest residential building in Minneapolis that is being proposed in the historic district on the other side of the river. And as was mentioned, the plan has always called for the biggest buildings to be in Minneapolis. Now we're seeing the kind of creep of that tall building with a density that's beyond what's appropriate for a historic neighborhood into this side of the river. We believe that the nature and location and scale of this proposal it demands and requires an EAW, but more importantly, the context in which it's happening. You got to realize, as you probably do at this point, we've got the Superior plating, big development going on. We've got Mortensen coming in. We've got the Schaefer Richardson. And now I'm expecting that we're going to have a lot of new proposals coming in on the General Mills site, all within a half a mile of this site. So I think really importantly, we need to consider the cumulative impact and are just asking that an independent review process be conducted, particularly in light of the cumulative impact of so much development happening so quickly in our side of the neighborhood.
Ms. Glazer, can you wrap up, please?
Yeah, the second very shared concern has been the height of the building as that second largest building. We think it's bad precedent to be moving the scale of a building into our community. And in some ways, I really think it's unfair to NISE and the Schaefer Richardson project, which had proposed 27 stories, then worked with the neighborhood to scale it down to an approved project that is both terrific infill, terrific addition to our community, and that I think then provides a model for what we should and be having in that region. So we're not against density. We think we can accomplish it within the historic guidelines in our community. We're not against change. We're here to be part of it. But we would like to ask and believe that the city would be remiss not to ask for an independent environmental assessment on this site. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. With that, anyone want to make any remarks? Colleagues, any members? Okay. Is there a motion? Someone want to make a motion? Councilmember Wright?
Thank you, Madam President. I believe we have before us a process that's rather circumscribed, and I think the facts before us lend to the staff's determination, and so therefore I will move that denial and direct staff to construct some findings for the record to that effect.
Okay. Councilmember Reich has moved to deny the petition and then direct staff to adopt or to prepare findings of fact and adopt them. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. And with that, we have dispensed with our agenda. Am I correct, Mr. Wittenberg? Okay. And motion to adjourn is in order. Move. All in approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you.